Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. I'm your host, Talisa Angel Garcia, and today we're diving into a powerful conversation you can't afford to miss. My guest is the incredible Jenny Lytle, BSN, RN, a nurse, coach, speaker, and author of SelfCare Isn't Selfish, the compassionate nurse's step by step guide to personalized stress relief. With 30 years of frontline experience, 19 of those in hospice and end of life care, Jenny knows firsthand the emotional weight caregivers carry. But Jenny didn't stop at surviving burnout, she transformed it. Inspired by her own challenges and loss, she created the Becoming Method, a practical framework that's changing lives by helping caregivers break free from stress, prevent burnout, and build self care routines that stick without guilt. Whether you're a nurse, family caregiver, or healthcare professional, Jenny's story and insights will leave you inspired, equipped, and ready to take action. So grab your journal, take a deep breath, and get ready for a heartfelt conversation that just might change your life. I'm incredibly excited to have you on today. Uh, Regarding Mama Mabel's Caregiver podcast, the podcast family, y'all listen up. This will be a great episode because of the guest that we have on today. As stated prior, Miss Jenny Lytle, she has a great amount of experience. Miss Jenny Lytle is a coach. She has experience in being a caregiver within the hospice space. She's also a podcast host. She's also a published author. So, you all, this is going to be an exciting episode and one that I truly believe will resonate with a lot of you all and also help. With that said, I'd like to get straight into it. All right. So, Jenny, tell me, you wear many hats. As just stated, I understand that you are, for an example, a podcast host. You also are a published author. You're also a coach. You've also spent time in the hospice care realm. Tell me about yourself. How did you get started? How did all of this come about?
Well, it's been a while, so I'll try to give you the shortened but not too shortened version. So, like you said, I've been a nurse for 30 years now. And that started, I was young and had pneumonia when I was, like 3, 4. I was in the hospital quite a bit, and I liked the nurses' thermometers. And that kind of made me want to be a nurse. And that's something that always stuck with me. I kind of went back and forth a little bit. There was a period of time when I wanted to be more in mental health than in traditional nursing, but ended up going to nursing school. It's been great. I've done a few different areas of nursing, but primarily it's been hospice. That's what I've done for the last 19 years. With, again, little bits of other things kind of mixed in there, and some mental health nursing too. So that's been fun. But yeah, the hospice thing was not something that I really expected to get into, but I had a close friend whose dad was sent home on hospice. He had lung cancer, and then he had a big decline over the weekend, went to the ER, and they sent him home on hospice with 2 weeks to live. And that was really my first experience with hospice care, was seeing that and being there with their family, because they were pretty non-medical. And so I was there to kind of support them. And I thought, you know what, this is like a really cool thing. And I ended up applying for a position a month or so later with that same company. And, the rest is history.
That's awesome. So, while you were, and you still do hospice care.
I do. I do. Yes. I do on call now and I've done a variety of roles in hospice care. I did some, some education and quality type things and I've done a lot of different on-call roles and traditional, RN case management with that. But yes, now I do after hours on call. So I'm I don't really see people usually unless it's in the middle of the night and there's something not going well. But it's something that works well with my schedule with, like you said, the other hats that I wear too. So it,
Okay.
that's one of the great things about nursing is there's so many different options and so many ways to make it work into your life and season of life and all of that.
That's awesome. So thinking about, being in that space
Hmm.
and connecting with caregivers,
Hmm.
what are some of the just some of the things that comes to mind as you start to think about, the people that are serving in that space to their loved ones, playing
Hmm.
a caregiver?
Yes, it's so one of the things that I truly love about hospice care is that, my role as a nurse and our roles as the hospice team period is really to empower and educate the families. And that's what I always tell families when I go in. I'm like, you're the ones doing the hard work. You're doing the hard day-to-day really challenging stuff, but it's my job to support you, to give you the tools that you need, to remind you that you're doing a really good job and it's something it's hard. It's hard for everybody. It's definitely hard when it's somebody that you love and maybe there's not all relationships are wonderful, everything goes well kind of relationships. Sometimes it's people that are caring for parents or children or grandparents. There's so many varieties, but caring for people that maybe they don't have a great relationship with. Maybe there's a lot of hurt, that's coming up. And so it's definitely not, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a simple approach really, but it's about just meeting people where they're at and really listening to what are your what are your concerns and just reminding them that they're doing a good job, they're doing the best they can, and that it's okay to have whatever feelings they're having. um as someone who has worked, of course, with a lot of people who are getting close to passing, I always try to tell family members, especially if it's been, a very difficult time or a very challenging time or a very long period of time that they've been caregiving, that you may feel a sense of relief when they pass. That doesn't mean you didn't love them. That doesn't mean you're an awful person. That means you're human. And it's been something that's taken such a huge toll. You may be feeling grief, but then you may have that little bit of, whew, wow. And that's okay. Those are all just really normal emotions and that's something that people can really feel bad about if they don't know that that's just something that really is to be expected.
This is interesting that you say that. I've spoken to a lot of different caregivers, and some of the messages that I receive is that, we struggle when you're a caregiver. There's a battle that takes place in itself in terms of how we're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to handle everything, the type of emotions that we're supposed to have when we're going into various situations with our loved ones as pertains to the caregiving journey. So to hear you say even that, like it's okay to feel a level of relief, even though, you know, you are dealing with something that could be very serious during your caregiver journey, like that's okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I believe
Right.
that.
And it doesn't mean that you didn't care. It doesn't mean that you don't wish that things could be different. It's it can be all of that together. And we put so much pressure on ourselves and especially family caregivers because there are all of those family dynamics wrapped up in it, and it's so easy criticize ourselves and should on ourselves. I should be doing this. I should be feeling this way. I shouldn't. And really, it's what is. And you do the best you can. And you realize that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have times when you say things and think, ugh, why did I say that? But that's just natural kind of stuff, and having a little bit of grace with yourself. And the way that whether it's, this or other circumstances, the way that we talk to ourselves is not the way that we would talk to our friends, So in those situations where you're, yeah, but, I did this thing. It's like, okay, what if one of your, best friends came to you and they told you this story? Like they know your backstory, they know all of this. And then they tell you, and then I said or did this thing. Would you say, oh my gosh, you're awful, I can't believe you did that? No, you'd have more compassion for them. And so being able to turn that on ourselves is, it's a gift. It's a gift to ourselves, because caregiving is the hardest work I think that there is, and it doesn't pay well. And you don't get a lot of time off. And so, just being able to have that grace with yourself is so important.
That's great that you said that. So, question for
Hmm.
you, thinking about the mindset that a caregiver should take on when they're entering into uh, the realm of being a caregiver and
Hmm.
how and advancing along their journey.
Hmm.
What are some tips that you can share in terms of really making sure that the mindset is where it needs to be and that
Hmm.
it's a healthy one to have, and
Hmm.
tips to help encourage
Ah,
the caregiver?
great question. So I would say, first of all, realize that you are not going to be able to do everything all the time. You may want to, your loved one may expect or demand that from you, but it's just not possible. It's not possible long term. You may be able to really, push and work yourself to the bone for a little bit, but eventually it's not going to work. And so having some boundaries in place, if you have, because there are some people who will take everything you give, and still want a little more. And I've got some friends who have gone through this, with their loved ones, where it's just like whatever they do, it's never enough. There's a lot of guilt trip kind of stuff going on, and being able to lovingly but firmly set some of those boundaries where, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z, and or I can, be here this amount of time or do these particular things. And it's hard to give real specifics because there's so many different varieties of caregiving. But just knowing, okay, here's the things that I can do and here's the things that I can't. And or the times that I'm not available. And know what's negotiable for you and what's just not. And when okay, here's, like I've got to get X amount of sleep in order to be able to continue to care for you. Um, and being able to say, during this time, I'm not going to be available. Now, of course, this is different if it's somebody that, that has to have 24/7 caregiving, and then there need to be other things there. But, sometimes in the earlier stages, that sometimes can go on for a very long time. Maybe somebody needs help with meals and, bathing and things like that, and checking in to make sure that they're okay. But there's periods of time that maybe they are okay on their own. So, and maybe they don't like to be alone, but that doesn't mean that they're unsafe alone. And so, having those boundaries in place can sometimes feel selfish or feel like you're, really letting them down. But the reality is, when we have good boundaries, then that enables us to be able to show up longer term and in a better space. When you are worn out, you're not going to be happy and perky and, always giving lovingly of yourself. It gets to where you're burned out, you're grouchy, you're resentful. And even if you're able to hide that, it takes a toll on you and on those relationships. So I think that's one of the most important things, is just kind of being clear about that. And then figuring out, like, what is it that you really need to be doing, what are the things that, okay, here's the most important things. And, are there other people that can help with those? Are there some things that you can, delegate to friends and family? A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times there's people who are like, oh, if you need anything, let me know. And it's like, well, I don't even know what I need, but trying to, and sometimes sitting down with a friend in that case too, and talking about, okay, what might be helpful. And, maybe it's somebody going in and getting groceries, or coming and just sitting for a little bit so that you can get, so that you can get out. And whether that's, you can go and take a nap or go for a walk. Those little things can mean so much. And they don't have to take a lot of time. They don't have to take a lot of money. There's also, different organizations that can help with some of that. Some, depending on income levels and structure and all of that, but sometimes it can be paid caregivers, and sometimes there are some free resources that are available too. But exploring those type of things.
Okay, that's awesome. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that number one, there's nothing wrong with having boundaries
Absolutely.
as a
Hmm.
caregiver. And that's great that you said that, because I know that there are many people who struggle outside of the caregiving realm with setting boundaries for themselves.
Hmm.
Just like it's important to have boundaries outside of the outside of the caregiving realm, it's important to have boundaries within the caregiving realm, because you're entering into a space that you have never been in before. And
Hmm.
so there will come a time where you will need to, be able to have a clear mind, and to have a clear mind you need to know what works for you and versus what doesn't work for you.
Absolutely.
So with the setting of boundaries, would you say, for an example, I'm a note taker. I
Uh-huh.
take notes. And would you say like that's healthy to do? Like think about as it pertains to boundaries, think about, what will work for you versus what will not work for you. Think
Right.
about what's a negotiable versus what is a non-negotiable.
Absolutely. Yes. And having those things, because it's when we have all of that stuff swirling around in our heads, especially if it's, a new caregiving situation, or maybe you've been a caregiver for a while, but now the dynamics of that are changing a little bit. It's good to get that stuff out of our heads, because, it's all of that stuff is swirling around, and we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to do this? And what's this? And like you said, exactly, what's non-negotiable for me, what are things that, like, what's the bare minimum that I need to be doing, I mean, kind of have that, the bare minimum that somebody needs to be doing, I guess, instead of taking that on. And a lot of times, especially as women, we take that on, we go, okay, well, all of this needs done, whoops, all of this needs done, so I must be the one that has to do it all. And that's not always the case. And sometimes we do that because we are maybe the closest one to our loved one. And so we feel like, well, they'd want me to do it. Or sometimes it's because we feel like we're the only one that's going to do it right. And sometimes we just do it because that's just always been our role. And we're the one that does all of that, and we're the ones who can handle everything. But it's you mentioned that about setting boundaries in like all areas of our lives. And that's why I'm so passionate about all of this now, is because I had horrible boundaries, or maybe non-existent boundaries, really, when I first started in hospice. And then looking back years later, when I got really burned out, and I wished that I would have done things a lot differently. And the same way with my mom, I had poor boundaries with her. And I look back now that she's gone, and I think, if I would have had some of those uncomfortable conversations, our relationship could have been better. And I didn't want to do it because I knew it would be uncomfortable, and I knew that it would be, not great in the moment, but long term, I believe that it would have been better. And so, you know, just being able to figure out, like, what is it that needs to be done, um, who are the other, the other people that might be able to do these things? Are there things that, that I can set up ahead of time to make things easier? So, maybe it's something as simple as, ordering your groceries where they can be delivered, or you can go pick them up instead of spending time at the grocery store, and menu planning and doing some meal prep where you don't have to spend so much time. It's all those little things that seem like, well, that's really not the big issue, but it's all that stuff that takes time, that takes energy, that, that we've only got so much of.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. There are a few things that you said that really, well, everything you said really resonated with me. And within everything that you said, there was something that really, really resonated with me. And going back to what one of the things that you said that, you need to be kind with how you talk to yourself, because the
Mm-hmm.
way we talk to ourselves individually, it's not the same way that we would talk to a loved one. So what I got from that and thinking about letting people in is it would be a good idea for anyone that is a caregiver and is, undergoing this journey to go ahead and instead of instead of having those conversations with yourselves that we all do,
Mm-hmm.
what about having pretending that you're talking to a loved one of yours, having
Mm-hmm.
that same conversation, but pretending that you're having a conversation with that loved one of yours, because you won't be as hard on
Mm-hmm.
them as you are on yourself.
Absolutely.
That should also help you to open up to allow people to come in and help you.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, Miss Jenny, I was a caregiver, and I was when I was a caregiver, I was the only one out of all of my friends who was a caregiver, the only one out of all of my friends who had a terminally ill parent, also the only one out of my friends to lose a parent at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
went through it, at an earlier stage of life than many. And when I was taking on the caregiving role, I mean, I averaged only 2 hours of sleep. I averaged only 2 hours
Mm.
of sleep. And it was because my mother had stage 4 breast cancer, and she was in a lot of pain, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
pain at night. I cooked everything from scratch. I had CNAs, I had nurses. I would leave work in the middle of the day and come back just to open the door because my mother was too weak to open the door.
Mm.
No one knew what was going on, outside of a love of mine and my manager at the time. And I had
Mm-hmm.
to tell my manager what was going on because I would have to, even though I worked in the field at the time, I was having to come back home multiple times a day to unlock the door, just to unlock the door and to lock the door.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot, and I just felt that I had to I felt like I had to take everything on by myself. And even though I had people who, to your point, said, "Hey, if you need anything, I'm here." My mindset was, I got it. I'm strong. I'll handle it. But if I had have had that mindset, if I had have known to, several things, be able to set boundaries, uh, have conversations with myself in a very loving way, and allow people in, that's
Mm-hmm.
something that would have helped me. So when
Mm-hmm.
when you shared that information, that really resonated with me. And if it resonates with me, I know that I'm not unique. I'm sure there are many others out there that are, experiencing the same thing. So it's okay to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
That's very healthy. Just like, and I'm sure many people are working on setting boundaries outside of the care realm. It's time to also work on setting boundaries within the care realm as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, again, being kind to yourself, very loving to yourself. And if you can't be loving to yourself, pretend that you're having a conversation with one of your loved ones, and be open. If a person says, "Hey, I'm here," to Jenny's point, you can take notes, and you can, what is it that I need? Oh, well, I
Mm-hmm.
can't go to the store because I have to work, and I have a meeting, and I have this, that, and the third going on. Oh, well, my friend said that they can help, or my sister says she can help. These
Mm-hmm.
are things that will really help.
Right. And it can be those little things. And when you were saying that, it reminded me of something that I heard. it's been several years ago now. Somebody mentioned it and it's really stuck with me about, those times when we want to be the one, when we feel like we need to be the one doing everything. And this, applies to caregiving, but just in general, you hear somebody say, "Oh, I need this," and you're like, "Oh, well, I'll do that because I can." But sometimes it's something that you're really excited about and you're like, that's just like that's a perfect fit for me. And other times you're just doing it because you want to be helpful. And but when we don't allow others in, when we take on all of the work, when we're doing the things that are maybe meant for somebody else to do, then we may be taking their blessing. And because we like to, I mean, we're wired so that we feel good when we help other people. And so yes, there are some people who will say, "Oh, well, let me know if you need anything." And that maybe them well enough to know they're not going to be there. They're just saying that because it's the right thing to say. But most people genuinely do want to do something, but they just don't know what to do. But if you give them something simple to do, that is maybe something that, that they're really good at, or just something that anybody could do, it doesn't have to be you, then they get that feeling of, hey, I did something to help out. And you get those extra, 5 to 60 minutes or more to yourself. So it's a win-win, really.
That's awesome. And you bring up another great point, like being able to have some time to yourself. That's something that's very important. I know that, I've had other guests on the show that have talked about, within the space that you're in, making time for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, how does one make time for themselves as they're going through the caregiving journey?
Well, I think that like with everything, it's something that really needs to be personalized to that person, to that situation. And that's something that, whether I'm talking to family caregivers or people that are working in healthcare, whatever that looks like, or honestly, just anybody that's dealing with some stress and self-care issues, I really encourage them to figure out, like, what is it that you need? What is it that you need right now? Not what do you feel like you should need, not what somebody else tells you should need, but when you stop for a minute, and because we don't stop a lot of times and think about what we need, but when you just stop and you close your eyes and you take a couple of deep breaths, and my kind of check in with myself sometimes, especially when it feels like everything is out of control. There's so much going on and I don't even know where to start. And I'll stop and take a couple of breaths, and I'll think, what do I need most right now? And if I'm in a really bad headspace, if things are really bad, then I'm like, I don't know. Or, I need a break. I need a vacation. But, really, if you just sit there for a minute or so, and usually it doesn't take even that long, and you'll like something will pop up. And sometimes it's something weird. It's not really what you would expect. But sometimes it's just, what? I just need to get outside for a couple minutes. And that can be, if you're able to go for a walk and leave your loved one alone, for a little bit, then wonderful. But if not, just, going outside and just breathing the fresh air, or putting your feet in the grass for a minute, just those little things really can have a big impact. And, figuring out the things that really fill your cup, and the things that make you feel better, make you feel more equipped to handle things. Like me, I know that starting my mornings with my devotionals, that's something that like sets me up for success for the day. When if I oversleep and or things are, I've got things going right away, it's just my day doesn't feel as peaceful, it doesn't feel as calm and intentional as it does when I start that way. So I try to, I try to make sure that I'm doing that. Do I always? No. and and then, and do I occasionally beat myself up for that, knowing what works and not doing it? Yes. But trying to have that compassion with myself. And okay, you know what? Like, I'm human. I'm gonna make mistakes. Things are going to fall by the wayside, but it's just that bringing it back instead of thinking, well, I never can do this, or I always mess this up. Instead of being so general like that, just being like, okay, you know what? And today's a new day. And so here's what I'm going to do. And then jumping into to that. But really thinking about the small things. And sleep and breathing are huge. Sleep is when our bodies repair. That's when, from a physical level and emotional level, all of that. So being able to sleep and get some good quality sleep is so important. Getting some kind of exercise, making sure you're drinking. They're very basic things, but they're the cornerstones of all of that. And then and just doing some deep breathing, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, doing some slow breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And that's something I encourage people to do in the bathroom. If that's the only time that you feel like you have a little bit of space to yourself, stay in there an extra minute and take a few deep breaths. Nobody's going to miss you in that minute. You're able to take that time for yourself.
That's awesome. Sometimes you can be so overwhelmed that you can forget about the little things.
Mhm.
Sometimes you could be so overwhelmed that you may not remember the basic things that, bring you joy while
Mhm.
you're undergoing this caregiving journey. So like if you're in that space, what would you recommend?
Well, so I would recommend, if you're able to, if you're not in that space right now, if you're like, I don't even know where to start. If you're somebody that thinks, okay, yeah, I know some things. I don't have time to do them, but I know some things that bring me joy. Then get those written down. When you're in a calmer headspace, have a plan in place for, okay, here's these things that I know are beneficial, things that I know help to fill my cup, help to de-stress me. Because, when you're in the midst of what can feel like a crisis, or what may, genuinely be a crisis, that's not the time to think, okay, now what do I need to do? So, okay, hold on, here's this, I'm going to do one of these things. Now, if you are in the middle of that right now and you're like, I don't even know, then I always encourage people to just start with the breathing. Start with breathing and gratitude. When everything seems to be going wrong, look for something that's going right, and look for something specific. And it can be, oh my gosh, this coffee was amazing. Or I was able to get in and out of the drive-through to pick up medicine quickly, because sometimes you're there forever. But looking for the good, because our brains are programmed to look for danger and look for negative things. And um we really have to be intentional about looking for the good things. But when we're looking for those, then we'll find more of them. And that's something that really can help to get us through the harder times.
One of the things that, and I'll share with the podcast family, one of the things that I did and I still do, and when I find that like I'm really stressed out, or I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed, even when I was a caregiver, in and outside of that realm, is I'll, and this is just, I call it a Talicism. I'll go on to social media, and if I run across a funny video, I will either download the video or I'll do a screen recording of that video, and I'll keep it in my phone. So when I'm really stressed out and I need to just laugh, because laughter for me, it
Mm.
helps to break,
Mhm.
the negative feeling. I'll scroll through my phone and I'll watch that video, and I'll just take, whatever, a minute or 2 minutes out to just fully engross myself into the video and just laugh.
Mhm.
That's something that I know it's small, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And if it's really funny, I've been known to also share it.
Mhm.
So
I
usually
love
I share it through the day. My friends will be in meetings. They're like, "What's Talisa? What's going on? You sending me?" But it's just something because it makes them laugh too.
right.
So,
Yeah.
that's something that I do. And then to your point, breathing is so very important, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. I'll share with you one of the things that I do. If I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed, I'll take a couple of deep breaths and I'll say a few affirmations, something really simple
Mhm.
like, you know, I am safe.
Yeah.
You're feeling like the world around you is crumbling down, and you're trying to, take care of your loved one, and there's so many hats that you're wearing, which I did and I experienced. I learned to take deep breaths and just say, I am safe, I am well, everything's okay.
Mhm.
Like
Right.
I got this.
Mhm.
So things like that I found to be very helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And that's a great point you make about the laughter too. And I do I do that. I'll get on, usually in the evening, I'm looking on Facebook and I've got a ton of, cat videos that pop up. and, and so I've got my husband, he's probably like, "Oh my gosh, just send it to yourself already." I'm like, "Hey, you got to look at this one. Hey, you got to look at this one."
Right.
And I'll send them to myself so that I've got them because our sons, they're older and they live on their own, but when we get together, then we're like comparing memes. It's like, "Hey, you got to see this. Hey, you got to see that." So it's those little things, and it's a way to de-stress, but it can also be a way to connect too. But yeah, I love that, just saving them. I didn't even think about like screen recording them, and then you've just got them right there, and that's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot of videos on on my phone. So if it's a stressful day, or whatever the case is, if I need to just take a moment, I'll
Hmm.
just take a step back, look at my phone, I'll laugh, and it'll help to just, like I said, to break the monotony, and then I'm able to return back to what I'm
Hmm.
doing. But within that, what you said is very important, and that is, again, just making time for yourself. And I know that as a caregivers, we are busy,
Hmm.
and a lot of us wear many hats. However, you're very important. And in order to operate at your best, you have to be able to, invest in yourself and pour within yourself, from a full glass versus
Hmm.
you need to be running over. And it's, well, how can I get my cup to run over when, I'm dealing with so much, and I'm trying to just navigate everything. But to what Jenny's point, it is the small things that we forget. Is the Did I get enough sleep? Am I drinking water?
Hmm.
Did you eat today?
Yeah.
You did you take a moment to at least stretch? You don't have to run a marathon, but are you,
Right.
are you
Absolutely.
stretching? Like, what is the one thing that you've done for yourself today?
Hmm.
So that's very important. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, you're
Thank you for sharing.
welcome. You're welcome.
So you are a coach, everybody. In addition, like I said earlier, Jenny Lytle is also a coach. So tell
Yes.
me about that. How did you get into that, and where are you with it?
Yeah. So, well, I got really burned out. And so I had worked at my first hospice job for 12 years. Yeah, it was like 12 and a half years. And I had, like I said, really, really bad boundaries. And so I had known for a while that it was time to leave, but I kept kind of resisting that. And I ended up very burned out, um, I was just not in a good place. And when I left then though, I thought, wow, this is kind of awesome. I feel really free. And, now what am I going to do? And, I felt like I had all these possibilities, but I remember I had taken my kids and I dropped them off at school. And part of it was like, I felt like I had all this time with my kids, because you know, I was in hospice. And so the people that I was caring for, they only had a little bit of time left. And I kept feeling like, well, I've got all this time with my family. And when I started in hospice, my kids were in preschool and kindergarten, the two youngest. And when I finally left, they were a junior and senior in high school. And all that time that I felt like I had, it was gone. And I took them and I dropped them off at school, and I was walking in the park and I was feeling good. And then all of a sudden it hit me, and I thought, who am I? Like, if I'm not a hospice nurse, then who am I? And especially, as my kids were getting older too. And I thought, oh, this is like a whole big life change. And I I had talked with a friend prior to leaving, and she had gone through a coaching program. And I thought, because before that, it was kind of like hospice. I knew of hospice, thought I knew what it was, didn't really know. In the same way with coaching, I was like, life coaching, like who does that? That's like something that rich people do. The rich and famous people go to life coaches. But when I actually looked into it more and had my own coaching experiences, I was like, this is really cool. Like I love I love what it does. And I had been like in and out of therapy from the time I was, 12 or 13. And so I knew what that was like, but this was different. And I really thought, I felt like it combined the things that I loved about nursing, but also brought in a lot of that mental and emotional and psychosocial health part that I really, really loved. That I didn't get to do enough of in nursing a lot of times. And so that led me to taking a coaching program and then kind of trying to figure out, okay, who do I really want to work with? Um, and mostly I work with women who are stressed out and really struggle with self-care and just helping them to find ways to fit in self-care into their lives and to do some mindset work around that, but to fit it in ways that it works and it's successful without feeling like it's another full-time job. Because a lot of people feel like that they're failing when it comes to self-care too. Well, I've done these things that they say I should do for self-care and they don't work for me. And I'm like, what they say doesn't matter. It's what really works for you. And so diving into that and being able to take a personalized approach with that. So that's kind of where all of that came in.
I love that. And just thinking about your background, the fact that you're a nurse, you have experience with hospice care, and that you're a business coach. I mean, podcast family, this really opens it up for you, anyone that is on a caregiving journey, because Miss Jenny Lytle, she has the experience in the various realms, and guess what? She's also a coach. And what's really beautiful about that is the fact that you would be able to just relate with a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if they're corporate, it doesn't matter if they're caregivers or not caregivers. If you're stressed, you need help uh, navigating the realm that you're in. Jenny Lytle has you covered, and she can even speak to you and connect with you in ways that other coaches can't, because she has that background and she's been doing it. What you said, over 19 years.
Yeah. Hospice
Yeah.
for 19 years, 30 years
19
as a
years,
nurse. Yeah.
30 years as 30 years as a nurse, and it's always great when you're able to connect with people who you feel like understands you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so having that is, I mean, y'all, this is great. I'm just, again, I told y'all I'm excited that you're on the show as my guest, and you're sharing, your knowledge and your wisdom with everyone, and you're also serving as a great resource. So that's something that it's very touching. I don't take for granted. I'm sincerely grateful for that.
Well,
Um,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's kind of fun. So yes, that was very flattering, but then I feel this, I'm in the hot flash season of life. And so I just felt like I'm seeing myself out of the corner of my eye and I'm like, I look like a tomato. I just got whoo. And so, so, the thing is, I do have a lot of experience. I do have, um, a lot of stories, a lot of people that I've talked to, but really I'm a good listener and a good question asker. And because I believe that we have the answers within ourselves. It's just being able to access those. And so that's what I'm good at is helping people get to that. And you'll probably mention this later, but seriously, I am happy to speak with anybody, do a free discovery call. I am not high pressure about anything. If it's just something like, hey, I've got this particular situation, I don't know what to do, or what do you think? I'm happy to talk with anybody. You can book a call, send me an email, whatever.
You're dropping so much knowledge, and I hope y'all, podcast family, I hope y'all are hearing everything that she said, because she said something that I just boom resonated with me. And that is, the answers are within inside of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's inside of us. And it's just a matter of really being able to connect with that and pull that out. And so, as a coach, this is what Jenny does. She
Mm-hmm.
helps you to access that and to pull from that, and to, help you out along your journey. And side note, I'll share this with y'all, the podcast family. Before we got started, I said, oh, well, let me turn on my ceiling fan. Um, and that because I've been having a few hot flashes myself, so that's why the ceiling fan is on. So you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. It's real. I thought they were under control, and they've come back with a vengeance. So
Yes,
I've done a few little
it
tweaks, and
did.
hopefully it's going to work soon.
Yes, 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 yes. So yes, that's awesome. And in addition to being a coach, I do want to share this with you all as well. Jenny Lytle also has a podcast, and it's called the Nurses Break Room Podcast. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So I really, it's part therapy for me, I think. It's a short podcast. Right now I do have somebody coming up in a few months that I'm going to be, because we kind of did a podcast swap, but other than that, it's just been me doing solo episodes. And it's quick, actionable things. Like, generally it's things that have come up in my life or in somebody that I've talked to, worked with, and that's just kind of spun that. Like this week's episode, for instance, it's about trusting our gut and listening to those things that that give us peace and don't. I was looking at taking a different job potentially, and on paper there were so many good things about it, and but I just didn't have peace with it. And I'd been praying about it. I had all my friends praying, and I was like, come on, like, I just want to know one way or another. And for me, a lot of it is, God sometimes gives me like very clear indications of things, and other times it's, I either have peace or I don't, and I couldn't get it, and I last night I sat down and I sent the email and said, hey, look, I know this is something that we've been talking about, and we were right here getting ready to start with all the onboarding stuff, but I can't do it. um and it was a little uncomfortable, but it would have been much more uncomfortable to start in a job that I'm already knowing isn't the best fit for me. So I think learning to trust our gut and not try to rationalize all the reasons why we shouldn't trust our intuition, because I think it's there for a reason. So there's an example of one of my episodes, but it's just short things. All of them, I mean, well, okay, I say all. Maybe there's one that maybe 11 minutes or something. All of them, for the most part, are under 10 minutes. Most of them are like 5 or 6 minutes, because caregivers, people that need to take time for self-care, are the people that maybe don't take time for self-care. So I try to make them short and sweet, and just something to maybe get you thinking about something a little differently.
That's awesome that you shared that with us. And podcast family, to just piggyback on what Jenny has just stated, we just talked about, making time for yourself. And while you're on this journey and you're making time for yourself, taking out like 10 minutes a day and just listening while you're cleaning, or while you're driving, or while you're in the shower. Like, Jenny has just dropped a lot of knowledge, a lot of golden nuggets throughout this interview. And just listening to everything that she said, if you tune into her podcast, you'll continue to receive beautiful gems. So please, be open and check her out. And I'll have that information for you uh, in my description. There's something else though before
But
we
wait, there's more.
start. Yes. So Jenny Lytle is also a published author, and she has a new book out, and it is it's called SelfCare Isn't Selfish. And can you tell us more about this book, please?
Yes, I can. Hold on. I've got an ant that I've got to get. There we go. Oh, hold on. There we go. Yes. So it is Self Care Isn't Selfish, the Compassionate Nurse's step by step guide to personalized stress relief. And that is, a lot of it is, the beginning kind of goes through my story in a little more detail and my mom and how all of that led to me being really passionate about stress relief and self care. And but then the rest of it, I mean, it's a little book. It's short, because again,
Can
I
you hold that up
Sure,
so
sure.
that
And this is actually, I don't have a real copy here. This is my one that's got my notes in it. So this was a proof copy, but so normally it wouldn't have this gray stripe on it, but it
okay,
is yeah, it's not very thick. It's quick. It's something that you can, read through in a few hours, or you can take it, step by step, because there's several chapters. I have it broken down where it's specific things that you can do to take care of yourself, and also, some mindset stuff as to why this is an important thing to do. But like I just flipped open here, and one of them is resist the urge to fix everything, and that's something that we can take on a lot of those kind of things ourselves, where we feel like we have to be the one to do it all, or we don't want other people to have to struggle. And sometimes it's those struggles that can help us grow. And so it's just very, very simple, practical things that can fit into busy lives without it feeling like, you've just added a bunch to your to-do list.
okay, awesome. So everyone, you're going to want to check out this book as well, because to Jenny's point, she has some action items on there, and also she'll have some food for thought for you, explaining the reasons why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as you heard Jenny talk throughout this interview, she's incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly knowledgeable.
Well, thank
So
you.
you're very welcome. So you do have a website
Mm-hmm.
where all of this information can be found.
Yes.
And it's at jennylytle.com,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Correct. Yes.
So
And
JennyLytle.com.
yep.
Go ahead.
Exactly. And so, yes, from there you can go. There's my podcast. There's also, you can get a free digital copy of my book. You can also find my book on Amazon. If you aren't tired of hearing me talk yet, I do have an audio book. I have an audio version that's me, and that's available there on Audible or Amazon as well. And there's a hardcover, large print, and then a paperback too. But there's also free resources on there. There's the Busy Nurse's Guide to Less Stress. And that's something, if you're like, you know what, I don't have time for a book right now. There's just it's a couple of pages, but again, simple, just a great way to be able to have kind of a sheet to refer back to when you are feeling more stressed.
Okay, awesome. So all of this information that we went over today in terms of the coaching that Jenny offers, her book that she has out, as well as her podcast, can be found on her website at jennylytle.com. This information will also be in the description of this episode. So if you are interested, and I know y'all will be, because I am, I ask that you please check out the information that will be in the description that will highlight this information for you, and will also serve as a resource for you if needing to reach out and connect with Miss Jenny Lytle. And this is something that's really important and very dear to my heart, because as you all know my story, when I went through the process of being a caregiver, I didn't know of the various resources that were available. I was younger. I didn't know, and everything was happening so fast. And I thought to myself, it would have been great if I had known about the resources that were available to me, because I would have used them. And during my time, I would have definitely been saying sign me up, emailing whatever I needed to do to become a client of yours. So yeah, so with that said, please check that out. And everyone, again, thank you for tuning in on today. And Miss Jenny Lytle, I sincerely appreciate you being on Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And actually I didn't tell you this part, but I would like to add this in just because of what you were saying as far as, resources and wanting to be able to take advantage of things like that. If of course I'm happy to, work with paying clients, but I'm also, I have a lot of free resources, including the podcast and stuff. And I do emails 3 times a week that also, kind of piggyback off the podcast episode, but have some other practical tips and some other books and resources and things that I've partnered with others to do. So, if you download any free resources, then you'll also get those emails and be kept up with new things that might be helpful for you.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so
You're
much for
so
that.
welcome.